recovery program?
Okay. The recovery program is a 9-month program, and 6 months is based within a residential farm setting or on a farm setting, sort of where they go. It's a sort of cognitive behavioral thing, but through a therapeutic community process. So it's peer mentoring and encouragement and stuff, and that program is not specifically Christian, although it's run by us and by Christian staff. So the whole principles behind it are Christian, and we operate it from that basis. But people don't have to be Christians to do it. Most of them do become Christians by doing it, which is which is great. So they do 6 months there residential, and then we have move-on houses where they do another 3 months where they go in and I think 3 days a week and engage the program, but they're living off-site in our supported accommodation. And then eventually we would then, after that 3 months, they can continue if they feel that they want to continue with that before they graduate. The graduation process will be in agreement with them. So if they feel, well, I think I'd rather do another couple more months, then they're quite happy to do that. Once they've graduated, we'll then move them on into one of our other accommodations, and that will be supported but at a less thing, and then they can go back into education or get a job or training or other things that we try and do to try and support them in that. So I think we're managing sort of about 6 houses at the moment with different stages of reintegration into the community. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very effective program because it looks to deal with the behaviors and the root causes, not just the symptoms on the surface. And that's the key. Well, that's true for all of us, isn't it? We can try and deal with the symptoms and keep trying to cut down the fruits and the shoots, but we have to deal with the roots and the seed. Where did it come from in the first place? Which is what we do. But we integrate it with the church. They join us on a Sunday in our Sunday meetings, which is quite interesting for them, for some of them who've never been in church before. And they also participate in various other things that go on. You come in and use the gym during the week. We have cooking sort of services where people go out there and help them in preparation for meals, because they're all responsible for cooking their own meals, or they on a rota basis, because they help look after it's community, so they help looking after each other. But it works well. So it's quite integrated with what we do, and then we encourage people obviously to get baptized when they're ready for that, and so yeah, it's good. We see some good results from it. Obviously it's down to people's personal willingness to participate and deal with things, but the environment is a very positive one to help them do that. So yeah,
that's good. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay. Well, if anyone else joins us, I've invited all the others that were there, so if they come, they come. Susan was there for a few minutes and gone. But yeah, where else do you want to start? Do you want anything else anyone wants to share or testify to, or ask?
Yeah, Susan must have internet problems. She just texted me. She thought we lost the hangout, and Joe just texted me. He's not going to be able to make it today. I'm not sure about the other girls. So.
Okay. All right. So, no, it's the 3 of us at the minute. So I'm trying to start with. How did your conference go?
It was great. We had a great time with Justin. We've had a relationship with him for years and really enjoyed him, and it was fun. You know, he brings that joy and laughter and, you know, the goodness of God, and I like that. You know, along with what we're learning about, you know, what you're teaching us on, and what we've learned on, you know, a positive eschatology and everything. It's just good to have that foundation of the goodness of the gospel and all that kind of stuff. So it was good. People were really touched and really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Good, excellent. I saw the little clip with the bell. Which was excellent. So good. Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so we now have 2 of our bells in the UK, so that sound is going out.
It definitely is, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we have it out. The musicians try and hide it away because they it sort of puts them off, they say, with the tone when they're playing on a different key. So it's funny, but yeah. Well, they hate tambourines too. It's like they would hate anyone playing a tambourine. It just puts off the rhythm of everything. So yeah. So excellent. It's good. Okay. So any particular questions or testimonies or anything you want to share today?
Well, I guess I have a question, Mike, and this is more of a subject matter, and that is one thing I have noticed over the last several months, and I'll speak personally, although I've seen it in other people, is, you know, I have started to get into a, you know, like a rote process, you know, like this formulaic way of doing things, and trying to do it, and trying to do all the things we're learning, all the things we're teaching, and don't get me wrong, I totally understand it. I think you have to have that before you can move on any farther anyway. And you know, and that's where I really felt like when Justin was here, he brought a key for us that I was missing, and I think several other people, because I've heard the phrase, you know, I'm tired. I'm just tired. I can't, you know, this it's not working for me anymore, kind of thing. And my understanding that what the Lord, as I've gone before the Lord on this, is that we've so focused on all the things to do, you know, court cases, the process, you know, the procedures, the protocols, and trying to do them all, the living sacrifice and all of that, that we've missed the other part that you teach all the time, you know, relationship, you know, that goodness of God. And, you know, so with Justin coming, what I saw, that's a piece we were missing, that just ecstatic joy and exuberation and just joy in the Lord. And I know you as a church, you guys have gone through all of that. You've gone through that Toronto revival stuff, you know, and you yourself have talked about being laid out on the floor, you know, in your meetings. But I think a lot of people that are coming into this, and even in our group, are fairly new to that, all of that stuff. They just barely got into Bethel, and then they moved on to this stuff and a little bit into the prophetic, you know, and they don't have that foundation of the joy and the goodness of God and all of that stuff. And I think there's been it seems to me like there's been this, you get so drawn off into the responsibility part of how all the do, you know, all the things we got to do. So I was wondering if you could speak on that just a little bit, because
sure,
yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, it's quite difficult for to get over, obviously, what you experience in your own personal walk and life. You know, when you're teaching it or when you're expressing it as, okay, here's a pathway that you can begin to engage and follow. You know, someone's not in your shoes and they're not sort of experiencing, and in a sense, you know, I don't particularly try and express a lot about my own personal emotions in it, because I don't want people to try and emulate that. They need to find their own way it works for them. But for me, the relationship aspect is very personal and very intimate. You know, I don't do anything without first love and engaging God and embracing Him and thanking Him and having a great morning and, hey, we're going to hang out and you know, and yes, there is the yielding and the surrendering and, okay, being yoked to Jesus, but it's all about relationship for me. You know, first of all, I want to talk to him and listen to him and enjoy his presence. And for that to me, that's joy, and peace and love. But it doesn't have to be the, okay, I'm drunk to experience that. And I think that's when we have meetings here, you know, there is a corporate sense of gathering and experience, and there will be expression of that through dance and flags and banners and all sorts of different ways people express it, and there will be a sense of this is very much a joyous celebration, and I'm great with that, and people laugh and people have, you know, cry, and people, it's just people have to be real. We encourage the environment to be just a real environment. If you're feeling really rubbish today, don't come in and wear a mask and say everything's fine, because it isn't. Be real, but don't dwell on the negative. Just saying, yeah, it's been really difficult, but I'm going to come and praise God anyway, and I'm going to encounter him today. You know, so we encourage reality, but we also don't encourage people to focus on the problem, focus on the solution. Because, hey, you're going to have an opportunity of engaging him today, so engage him in a positive way. Now, that being said, in my own personal, you know, when I meet with God and I talk to him, I don't get drunk. You know, occasionally, when I'm, you know, I do. I mean, when I was in Germany over the weekend doing a conference, you know, there was one occasion where we were in worship, and it was great, and I was really enjoying things, and I sat down to start teaching, and I was just that whacked outness, and I'm just sort of saying, okay, I need to sort of compose myself a minute, but then everyone started joining in with it, and so we had 5 minutes of, hey, this is fun, and everyone's laughing, and you know, because there was that sense of, hey, this is part of it. But you know, then I needed to teach something, so you know, I was able to eventually pull myself to a point where now I can begin to express what I want to share in that way. Now, I wasn't laughing all the way through that, but I was definitely, you know, in the presence of God and feeling love, joy, and peace. And joy is not just laughter or feeling drunk. Joy is the deepest perception of what it is to engage with God and be fully strengthened by the knowledge of and the experience of that. I mean, which means that the joy of the Lord is my strength in every situation, but I'm not always laughing my head off or going around in an inebriated, drunken state to feel joy. It's very much more of my personal relationship brings me into that sense of real peace, joy, love, and I live from that. And everything I do when I engage First Love, I drink living water, so I'm being filled with peace and joy and love. You know, I engage with Jesus and engage him in that. So for me, it's just, that's life. You know, I never get tired. You know, in a sense, I may be physically tired if I do a lot of active work, whatever. I never get emotionally tired or spiritually tired, because he's the source of my life. So everything I do, I'm wanting to do from the perspective of his presence in me, knowing I'm loved. So I don't do anything for anything, because I do everything from everything. So for me, relationship is absolutely vital. It comes as a precursor to everything else. We must have that priestly intimacy of engaging before we begin to function in kingship. And actually, the level of authority we will have outworked from our relationship will be in proportion to the level of relationship it is. That's why God is calling us deeper. Deep calls to deep is not just going into all these wild and wacky things out there. It's going deeper and deeper into him, and it's that the deep things in God knowing the deep things in me, and we engage. So you know, what I want to do though is to encourage people to do that in their own way. So it isn't just, oh, we're all going to get drunk now. Some people might not engage in drunkenness. They may feel that's not me, you know, and we have to give people freedom to find how the relationship works out in intimacy with each person, which is why we don't tend to lead any of those things. We flow with those things. So if there's a morning where everyone's silent and on their face and it's just like, whoa, there's an awe. That's because people engage in that. And we could sometimes have 5 people who are on their face in that, and they could have 5 other people who are laughing their heads off, because it's the individual engaging that we're trying to encourage, not a set pattern. So it's giving people permission. It's okay if you feel this, then that's great. That's what you're doing. And in my own personal walk with God, I've shared this before, that I was in intimacy. The word intimacy has with it certain connotations, of feeling all warm and fuzzies and that sort of, wow, this feels really good, and I'm feeling these lovely feelings and everything else. And by and large, that's not generally what I do when I engage God personally. I do tend to feel that more when I come in corporate worship and then we engage together. But when I'm personally with God, I don't get those sort of feelings. And I used to feel, oh, there's something wrong. I'm obviously missing it because I'm not feeling that way when we're talking about being in intimacy. But God totally freed me up with this when we were looking at the whole thing of coming from slavery to sonship, and knowing our sonship in Him. He said to me one day, how do you feel my love? When do you know that you feel filled with love? So I'm like, I couldn't answer. It was almost like, I don't know. So then he sort of gave me some clues. Well, when do you feel most at home when we're together? So, when you're revealing things, when we're talking, and when you're opening up revelation to me. He says, so that's your language of love. Oh, right. So just as in our marriage languages, some people like intimacy of affection, some people like gifts, some people like affirming words, some people like quality time. Mine is quality time with God. That's different from my earthly language of love, which is more physical affection. So that was something that I was looking for, physical affection type things in my language of love with God, and He actually knows that what I really feel and what really makes it work for me is actually Him giving me personal revelation and us hanging out and spending quality time. So that freed me up to just be me in my relationship and discover that's what it is for me to feel love, joy, and peace. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't emotions involved with it, but there's more of a contentment and just knowing who I am in relation to Him that makes me feel, hey, this is just what it should be like for me. But for someone else, they may feel differently that God will reveal to them. So when God gives them gifts, they may feel special or whatever. And we're all special. I mean, that's the key. So, that's really why the whole manual starts with 4 modules on intimacy, because it's all about us learning that process of intimacy and engagement and experience with God. So that in that experience of God and being with Him, we learn to come from that place of intimate relationship and flow from it. Because the temptation would be, as you say, hey, we've got all this stuff to do, we've got a lot of work to do, we need to get on with the work, and then it becomes work orientated and task orientated and then eventually performance orientated, because the results will indicate whether it was good or not, and then we won't feel so good if things didn't go quite as we thought, rather than, hey, it's all good. I know I'm loved and accepted, irrespective of whether I ever do anything governmental whatsoever. But because I know I'm loved and accepted by God, that gives me the freedom to desire to do whatever He wants me to do, and that will include governmental stuff. So my own personal relationship with Him is based on being Spirit-led. So I open my first love gate and I engage Him, and then we come into agreement of Father, Son, and Spirit and me making a window of experience, and then I'm being led. So where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Sometimes I'll go to my garden and talk. Sometimes I'll go to the throne of grace if there's particular issues that I want revelation about. Sometimes I'll go into the waterfall and just feel refreshed. Sometimes I will go and present myself as a living sacrifice. I usually end up doing that because I know that I have governmental things that God's called me to do, but there may be, well, things on the way that I submit and get directed by God in. So it never gets for me ever, oh, this is a task and I'm getting tired and weary of this because I'm following a ritualistic process. No, I enter a relationship, then I let that relationship lead me. So it's always handy to say, God, what do you want us to do today? Yeah, where would you like us to go? And as I've yoked myself to him, he can set that agenda of where he wants me to go. But I ask. I don't make an assumption, I better shortcut this bit here because I've got so much legislation I need to do today. If there's so much to do, then I need to adjust my lifestyle to give me more time, or start controlling time to expand what I can do within the time I've already got. So I'm more effective and efficient. And of course, as we're learning the processes, they're not as efficient as they get when you have the pathway off. I don't need to walk through 15 corridors and go through 15 dimensions to get to where I'm seated by the Ancient of Days and I administrate a lot of my governmental stuff heavenly wise. I just go there. It's like I don't have to do all, I did. I learned where it was and how to get there, and now I'm there. So what used to take me an hour takes me 5 minutes or less. So now I am more effective because I'm not practicing, I'm doing. But we all got to get there, and therefore the repetition of the practice, if you're learning to run a marathon, you are going to get tired sometimes when you push yourself to go beyond running 5K. First time you run 10K, you're going to feel somewhat tired and stretched, and your muscles will probably ache, and next time it will be, can I do that again? Well, the next time you do it, you'll still ache a little bit, but probably a bit less until you've done it 10 times, and then actually 10K is really easy. Then it's like, then you run to 15K. You don't start running 26 miles in a marathon the first time you set out. You run a mile, and then 2, and then 5, and then 10. So this is the same thing. It's got to be realistically approached. It will get tiring when we're practicing a lot, but actually that's all just part of it. You get stronger. It's if you have an expectation that it's going to be, this is all going to be weary, and your attitude is all negative towards it, then the enemy will get in on it and he'll make you feel tired because you'll be negative. It's like, no, I must expect to be tired if I'm going to train. If I'm not tired, then I've not pushed myself enough. In a sense. So let's be realistic about it. Let's see that we're on a training program. It's going to take time, and if you're feeling too tired, then slow down a bit and spend a bit more time in relationship every day and a bit less time in the responsibility until you feel strong enough to push a bit further. There's no point pushing yourself beyond what you're capable of doing, because I've done that lots of times. When I get exuberant about playing sport and things, I've been to like sporting weekends and things where we've got together, I've come home a physical wreck because I've actually played everything, tennis, table tennis, badminton, squash, everything, football, golf. I did a weekend like that with a friend, and it's like I thoroughly enjoyed it. We had a competition who's going to win the most things. And it's like, came the end of the day, he was like 30 and I'm like 50 odd, and it was like, but I did really well until the squash, and the squash, it was just like, I guess you'd call it racquetball and stuff, but it was like, after that did me, and it was like, I got home and I crawled in, but I thoroughly enjoyed my weekend, it was like, I won more than I lost and I had a great time, but I was, it had a physical toll because I pushed myself way beyond because I don't normally play an awful lot of sport nowadays because all the kids have left home and I'm not playing tennis every week like I was. So, and I probably could go to the gym, which is about 5 feet across my door. My office is a gym, so I've probably no excuse for having the opportunity to do physical exercise, but I don't take it very often. So there's an expectation that, okay, it's going to get a little bit sometimes, hey, we're pushing, but if you're feeling tired, rest more, because essentially everything's got to come out of a place of rest. And so it says, labor to enter into rest. So sometimes we've got to make that choice. I'm going to choose to rest. So I'm going to soak a little bit in my time with God. I'm just going to hang out in the garden, and we're going to go and lie in green pastures, and we're going to go stand by quiet waters, or I'm going to float in the river of life and just let it take me and flow along. I do that sometimes. I just lie in the river and just flow downstream a little bit and have fun and enjoy it. But I don't need to do that as much now as I used to do that, because now I'm stronger. I'm physically or spiritually, I have built my spirit up to a degree where I can cope with legislating a law. I didn't do that at the beginning. I spent all my time in my garden and in God's garden, and very little time doing anything else other than eventually, okay, I'm going to get my mandate for today. But generally that was probably 10% and the other was 90%. Now it's probably more 70-30 legislation, but the relationship I get in rest and intimacy, I'm strong enough that flows through me, so I don't get tired like that, and I'm engaging with 20 or 30 groups a week, but I don't feel tired in doing that. I enjoy it. It actually brings life to me. So my attitude determines how I feel. The circumstances don't determine how I feel, because I rule my mountain, I rule my life, I rule my circles and spheres of influence, so they're not going to control me. That's what I'm supposed to do, rule, but I've got to be strong enough to rule, and that took time. This has taken me 5 years in terms of understanding the heavenly side of it, and took me 10-15 years before that to engage in the fact of where I could hear God and see him and engage in the relational side of it personally. So I think don't offer that this is a quick, easy thing. Make sure everyone understands, look, we're on a training program and we need to meet that out at the right amount. So probably you may be focusing in your corporate gatherings too much on the legislation and not enough on the, hey, let's get the intimacy and hear his voice before we go and do stuff, and balance it. When we get together in our legislative groups, we know we're coming to legislate, but we usually have a time. Sometimes it's just like, hey, let's engage God right now and just get to that place of letting go of all the day and everything that's done, and let's get in a place where we can just tune in to that. And our sort of larger corporate gatherings are more celebratory anyway. It's more about experiential and encountering. We don't tend to legislate in that. Although, one day I really would want to see our gatherings of like, okay, we're gathering around the ark of the presence of God in heaven, and we're all going to get assigned today. Some may get assignments in the room, some may get assignments in time and space or some dimension somewhere else, but we're all just come around the presence of God, rather than, hey, come and feed me, because that's not what it's about, So, yeah.
Thank you, Mike. That was awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. You're welcome. Yeah. And what I would say is everything that we can do corporately, we can have a flavor of that in our own life. What you can't have, obviously, is the overflow of somebody else. But we've got the flow of the life of God in us in the river of life. So, we just need to learn to drink from it. Now, there are some really good scriptures, like, draw joyously from the fountain of salvation. Well, that's what we've got to learn to do, to drink. You know, it's just we may not be drinking alcohol, in a sense, spiritual alcohol. We may best be drinking refreshing spiritual water today. So we may not feel drunk by it, but what we should get is nourished, sustained, filled with life as a result of it. And when we do get drunk with it, it's just, hey, that's just great. But you don't want to get, you know, in a natural sense, you don't want to drink alcohol to excess. But it says it's okay in moderation, in a sense. With God, I suppose, you know, we don't want to limit anything He does. So, you know, so we've come through, obviously, through the experience in 1993 of wild, you know, manifestations of stuff, and to God's pointing out, look, it isn't about the manifestations, it's about me. Don't let the manifestations rule, and don't be looking for the manifestations, come and look for me. And it's the same now. We're coming to meet with Jesus. We're coming to look to Him. I'm not, you know, don't focus on the gifts, focus on the giver. And we're still in that. That's still the reality of it. It's all about Him, not about us. And that will keep us into a reasonable place of not getting caught up into the works orientation. You know, but you may need to do some ministry into it. You know, we've had to deal with some of those things, court cases, into the very things that have got people stuck. You know, and then you know, outwork that in, hey, we're going to have a few weeks of refreshing. So really feel God wants us to just be refreshed for the next 3 weeks. You know, so that's what we're going to do, and encourage people even in their personal lives. Focus on refreshment, because God is going to pour it out. So drink. You know. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Anyone else got anything?
Mike,
Yeah.
you just mentioned doing court cases for things where people are stuck.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah. What we found was when we began to engage in new things, some people struggled with it. They just found it really hard, too hard. Particularly like when we started operating legislatively, we found as a bench of 3 we would release people and encourage people and give people permission to engage and to outwork things, and we found that there was a lot of inactivity, and so it was like, okay, what's going on? So we'd go and step in together, look for what's going on. There's a fear of responsibility, so we then do that as a court case. So what we then did, we took that to our bench of 12 and said, right, this is something we want you to consider in your own life. Look to see whether there's any aspect of this operating in you. If there is, deal with it personally. But when we come together next time, we're going to deal with this corporately, so that we can release this to all of us. And that's what we did. We stepped into heaven together, went into the court, got the accusations, pages of it, dealt with the accusations, then released the verdict. Everyone is free to enjoy the responsibility that they've been given, not to feel it onerous or burdened or fear that they're going to be told off, or, you know, if they get it wrong, and all the negative things that have come through previous church experiences mostly that created inactivity and passivity. And once we dealt with it from that perspective, then they took that, started operating in their own lives. So they, as a 12, started functioning better. That was released to our bench of 7. Then that gets released to the church. And so that then we then may make declarations to the corporate body on the basis of the verdict we've got, so that everyone knows, hey, we're authorized here to be free from any fear in responsibility. Therefore, the fear of, you know, getting it wrong and fear of failure and all the things that are attached to stuff like that. And then what we do then is then we would expect that that would start to come up in people's lives. And then we have a ministry team, that we have ministry appointments that people can say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Now, yes, I can see it. Now, can you help me? Now, the mature can usually help themselves and deal with it, but those who are learning, we have ministry appointments and set up things to help them. That might be live busting or doing a court case with them personally or ministering deliverance to them. Just depends on what the situation is. But it will help them grow and mature through it. So there's often, something that happens that then releases other things, and then eventually we start to see the fruit of it outworked in people. And we do those sorts of things over quite a number of particular issues. And we have a list of them that we're working through, bit by bit. And that's for us, that's why we don't get rushed into something. We have a whole list of things that our bench of 12 need to work through, because they were highlighted in a survey that we did with them to try and help get to understand where they were at. And we work that through, in a quarter of an hour session in one of our meetings, and then we do other things. But we're consistent with it, but we're not going to think, oh, there's 12 things here we need to do all at once, because that won't really be productive, because it'll probably wreck people. And so we do one thing at a time, then they get blessed by that, they then use that to authorize them to change and be different, and then they give that away to others, and then we'll do another thing. So that in itself will help. Structuring, in a sense, the time scale of things. We're not running a sprint. We're running a marathon, so it's okay to take time. We have a whole generation that's coming to do this. It's not going to happen and fall apart in the next 5 minutes. So let's take the time and use that perspective of time to give people that it's okay to be on a journey with this, that you don't have to rush. It's like, take your time. Don't not do it, but do it at the right pace for you. And of course, people are in different seasons. I mean, you can't expect a young mother with 3 young children who are all at school age to necessarily have the same time that someone who's retired can have. So you're helping them see how they can work and not feel guilty. Well, I can only spend 20 minutes in the morning with God. Not feel guilty about that. That's okay. Make sure that 20 minutes is as productive as you can, and enjoy it. Don't feel guilty that some other people are spending 2 hours with God in the mornings, because at your season of life you have responsibilities where you are focused on bringing the rule of God into your family. Perfectly okay. So people are in different seasons, different times, and therefore reflect that and encourage them also to feel free. Not to use it as an excuse to do nothing, but to be realistic about what season they're in and what they can legitimately do. Because they'll get guilty and condemned if we start putting pressure on them to do things that God isn't encouraging them to do. But that's, just bringing some wisdom into situations and seeing from a bigger picture and helping people fit in. There are urgency about some things sometimes, and you have to do stuff, but generally we need to be in peace, and we need to begin to administrate things from that place. And so some of the court cases have been very significant in breaking us free into some things. And our mountains have done court cases about their own mountains. And we did one about one of our ministers that was looking to be established, and it wasn't getting established as it should be, and therefore what was going on. So that our bench of 7 did a court case. They shared that with the 12, and it was just like, okay, that was shared with that mountain. Then we established that they needed a lot more guidance before they were able to set this ministry up, because we assumed that they were more aware of what to do than they were. And so then we sent our enterprise mountain to them, because our enterprise mountain is really great. They're consultants really in these things. They went and started asking them some questions, ascertain where they were, help them get a journey in place, and then they're now more equipped to be able to do what they were trying to do in the beginning. But a court case unveiled that, because there were a lot of accusations in that court case that were shared, and that enabled a process to take place. So, we're realistic that we're all learning, and we try and be somewhat reflective in the feedback of the process so that we can be aware where everyone is. So when we get our 12 together, quite often we'll have a feedback session. How are all the mountains doing? You know, any God shown anything? And in that, what we've encouraged in recently is to don't get a mile wide and an inch deep. You know, get an inch deep, an inch wide, and a mile deep. So when you get some stuff, get them functioning and working, and then move on to something else. Because people love revelation. And we have one group particularly that love getting stuff, and they have engagement with angels and all this stuff revealed, and they sort of stuck it out on the table one day and all these pictures of all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's great, but how much of it are we doing? You know, so it's great having all this, but start with one of them and get it into practice. Then you can move on to the next one and the next one. Not just get more revelation and more revelation that just like, oh, it's overwhelming. You know, we've got so much stuff to do, but we're never going to be able to do it. So some of this is just real practical stuff to help people engage in a realistic way, you know. So I mean, I like court cases, you know, when we do them, and I mean, I don't do many of them myself. You know, we do some as a 12, but all our, you know, we've equipped people to do them. I mean, I've just done the teaching on the courts here, done 4 sessions on it, and, you know, opened that up for a lot of people to gain, you know, wider knowledge of how to do it. But generally people are working at it, and it's a really good process to follow, because it will unveil things. You can sometimes some of our guys, they're lie buster pros, they lie bust situations, you know, specifically, you know, and so if there's an issue, they'll go and lie bust it, and then often the court case will come out of the lie bust, because if the lie bust will bring revelation, then the court case deals with the accusations that are there, you know, through the revelation that comes. But it's great because they're all doing that now, you know. You know, it's taken 5 years to get to the point where they're mostly doing it now, but they are. So, you know, we are able to begin to legislate things in a different way because of that fact. You know, and then God says, you know, well, I've got these laws that I want to release to you, because basically now you're ready to use them. You know, and there's processes to go through and get how do those work, and get a law established, and then begin to legislate out of that law. Then all our mountains are free to use that law, you know. But what we tend to do is this is how to do it, we'll do it together, then you can go do it, and then feedback what you're doing, and so we can all learn. And that's what we do. It's always about feedback, accountability, learning from each other, growing in it, getting stronger in it, being more fruitful in it, and then passing it on to others. You know, so, you know, each of our 7 mountains do that within our bench of 12, they then take it to their bench, and then their bench does it, and then they've got people associated with their mountain, and then they do it, and then everyone starts to learn. But I didn't have to tell them all, which is great, you know, because that's the point. It's not about me telling them, you know. I want others to tell them and to do it because they're doing it, and they have a testimony that they can share. Which is why I don't get involved in a lot of the sort of activity. In fact, I was going to go to one of the sea evenings, and the bench of 7 said, "Nah, don't bother, because if you come, people will just be asking you a whole load of stuff. So don't bother." So I think, great, I'll have a night off. I'll watch football instead. It was great. Yeah. So yeah. Anything else?
Mike, you mentioned earlier about expanding time.
Yeah.
So that your day fits into it or something like that. Can you expand on that?
Okay. Yes. Time. We should not be subject to time. We were created to operate outside of time. Time was created to contain sin. Therefore, we need to rule time and make time serve us rather than us having to serve time. And there are two ways of doing that. You can expand time, or you can contract time, if you like. And in one way, if you're trans-relocated somewhere, then you've contracted time. In effect, what would have taken you, I don't know, 5 hours or something, took you an hour. So you have 4 hours more to do something else. So there is a sense where we can do things in a way which actually opens up more time for us to do other things. And the other way is that we want to expand time so that it's like what we did in an hour or took us a day, we can now do in an hour. So it's like we have more time. I do this all the time. You know, when I first started engaging with people, I was trying to fit it in around my existing things, and I just couldn't see how I could do more than I was doing. Well, now I'm doing all the things I'm doing, and I'm still doing everything I was doing before, because it doesn't take as long. Or actually, it feels like, for me, I can do this, and I do it, and whether it's like I had 8 hours and it was just like one of my hours, but I can do more in the time I've got than I could before. I'm in faith for that, and you know, I sort of engage God with it. Like, you know, I've got this amount of time today, and I'm gonna rule the time, so I will be able to do this, and this, and I'm gonna mitigate against distractions coming my way. So I'm going to put a shield up so I don't get distracted, I don't get technical gremlins. You know, there's things that, you know, I try and rule, but there's a way in which when you step into the realm of heaven, then you're stepping into a different time, and the rulership there has a greater effect than if we're trying to do things here. But it's about our attitude towards it and our understanding that we have authority over it, and then being in faith with that expectation. That's what works. When I was looking at it from a natural perspective and trying to fit out how I could do all the things I was doing, I couldn't see how, and therefore I didn't try, because I couldn't see how. And when I gave in and said, yes, I'll do this, I couldn't see how, but I started to do it, and God opened the way for me to do it. So, you know, 3 years ago, I was not talking to anybody around the world whatsoever. I was still preparing a lot of material, doing stuff I was doing here. I still do everything, same things I do it. There's very little that I don't do that I was doing. You know, we have a little bit of administrative help with the Engaging God program, so you know, I don't do some of the things I was doing then, but even then I started doing them. You know, it didn't stop me, but I can do it quicker. You know, sometimes it would, you know, I would prepare a PowerPoint for Sunday's message or whatever, and it would take me, you know, best part of the week to get it sorted, and even then, you know, I would still be looking at it on Saturday and Sunday and whatever. Now I'm working, I've got like 8 PowerPoints open on my desktop, on my laptop, and it's like I'm working on them all. And so in the time that I would do one, I can work on 5 or 6. You know, so that has changed. You know, my capacity has increased, and God is enabled, because I don't have to think about it. I sit down there and start writing and start typing and start, you know, outworking from a flow. You know, whereas before I was trying to develop it, you know, through more study and preparation. Well, now I don't need to prepare. You know, years ago I used to write all my stuff out in longhand, you know, and read it loads of times so I would know what I was going to say. Now I have no idea what I'm going to say. Generally, I mean, I know the gist of what I'm going to say, but I've not worked out what it is. I just feel, hey, this is in my heart, so it's going to come out, and it'll come out according to the people who are there and what they need. You know, so all that stuff I have an expectation, and I also have an expectation that a lot of things in time that would be hassle factor for me, I expect God to deal with. So we have a deal. I seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and he sorts out all the other things that I need. and that means I'm looking for things to go smoothly. I'm looking things to be hassle-free and various things like that. So I have a faith expectation in this. I'm not subject to it. It's subject to me. Therefore, it's my responsibility to rule it. And I can, and I do. It's not to say sometimes things don't go wrong or things, but generally, I live a very stress-free, hassle-free life. It may be very busy from someone else's perspective, but it isn't from mine. Because busyness is usually an attitude that I'm doing things that I really don't want to do. I'm doing things I really do want to do. So there may be lots of hours I'm doing them, but I never use the phrase, well, I'm busy. Because if I'm busy doing this, it's an indication that I'd really be rather doing something else, which is why I'm seeing this as busyness, because it stops me doing all the other things I really like to do. Whereas I do everything I like to do, so I don't feel that. But God does do, once you start having this, things can happen. I mean, on the way back from Germany, this is a testimony I've not shared here yet, but I'm going to share it on Sunday. On the way back from Germany, I got to the airport in Hanover, I got there in plenty of time, and I was chilling out and and reading, and then it came to the time where we should have been called to the gate, and time went and passed, and I could see people start looking agitated, and a lot of people were going to Brussels, which is where I flew as a connecting flight, to connecting flights. They were going all over Venice, Eastern Europe, France, Spain. There were lots of flights connecting, and we were supposed to take off at 5 to 7, and it got to 5 to 7, and we weren't even boarded, So people were getting agitated, and eventually the sort of flight people said, "Oh, there's a problem with the walkway. You can't get onto the plane," And then people were rushing up to the desk. Well, am I going to miss my connection? What's going to happen if I miss my connection? And the panic started to set in, as it does. So I walked up to the desk and said, "Okay, what's the problem?" "Oh, the problem's with that." I said, "Well, why don't you just change that and give us a new gate and we'll walk to the plane?" So I just came with a solution. Well, that's what they did eventually. And so eventually we took off at 10 to 8 when we should have took off 5 to 7. So basically we were 55 minutes late, and some people had 40 minutes to get a connection flight. I had about an hour, but I got to go through security again because we're going off mainland Europe into the UK, which was a different terminal. So I looked at this and thought, there's no way in the natural realm that we're going to get there on time to get connecting flight. So I decided to do something about it. So I called for the angels to create an envelope in front of the plane, and I could see this envelope. It's like a warp envelope, like that we were going to fly through. And so the people on the flight attendants were all pretty much like not saying anything because they didn't want to get hassle from people. So they didn't say anything about connecting flights. So I just started to say, okay, no one's going to miss their flight here. We're all going to get our flights. Well, it was a 55-minute flight, and you can make up some, 5 minutes or so here or there, but we actually got there in half an hour. So we left at 10 to 8. We got there at 20 past 8, and no one missed their flight. And by the time we were almost about to land, they suddenly started giving out gate information because they realized people were going to be able to get their flights. Now, I don't know what they were thinking, but in reality, you can do things like that. I wasn't panicked. I was not going to be hassled either because I had stuff I needed to do on the Monday, and I wasn't going to be put off. So I took control of the situation, and essentially we got there in enough time for everyone to get their flight. And there was this girl who was on the same flight for me to Bristol to the UK who was really quite, oh, we're going to get there in time. I said, well, it's okay, just walk with me. And we got up to the security gate thing, and it was just like a massive queue, and she said, oh, we're not going to make it, I said, oh, we'll be okay. So she walked straight after me, and we just got through really quickly, and we got to the gate, got through our gate, and they said, oh, the gate's now closed. You know? So we got on the plane and flew home. So there are things that we have to start to take responsibility for. And, you know, for me, okay, I could have said, well, okay, did I do enough preparation to stop that stuff in the first place? Well, actually, God didn't tell me to, so he obviously had a purpose in it. So now I have a testimony to share of what you can do. You know, the girl said, oh, I really thank you for the emotional support. I was really getting upset, and so I helped her. Everyone got their flights, so no one was hassled. You know, so, you know, we learn to administrate things from a different realm. And so time is something that we're those that are supposed to govern, not govern us, I think. So, yeah.
That's an awesome story. Love that.
Yeah, that's great. Wow.
Mm.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm not any different from anybody else. I've just learned that I have authority, therefore I'm going to use it. And I'm not going to come out of panic or anxiety or fear. I'm going to come out from a sense of peace and rest, because God wants the best for me. So that's my expectation. You know, and I don't let anything sort of rob that. If there's a situation that seems to be causing a problem, well, okay, let's get at it and change it. You know, that will be my attitude in most things. You know, I don't feel I have to be subject or under any circumstances. I'm always supposed to be above them. So if they're not seeming to pan out, then I'll begin to change it. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Anything else? We've got a few minutes left, probably.
Well, Mike, I don't know, this might be opening up a big subject, and you may have to hold it for our next one, but, you know, when you came here, both times you came, I think you mentioned that you recognized there were some significant things in the atmosphere over the region, over the area, and since this is our Atlanta group, that, you know, I feel like we have some place of responsibility, or at least we don't know for sure what God wants us to do about it. But I mean, it was interesting when Justin was here. He indicated the same kind of thing, and specifically the thing that he saw, and you said it too, was this religious blanket, this stupor, this deadening thing that's just over the area, and even over people. If you flow into a certain way of doing things, people kind of sit back into that comfortable way of being, which is that cultural mindset that's over the Atlanta area. And I'm not by any means saying, you know, we have the biggest spirit in the world, you know, no, I don't want to go there with that, but just that this is our area, so we're responsible for it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you might speak into that a little bit and just, you know, give us some advice on how we can address that as the Atlanta group, you know, as what our place of responsibility and how we can deal with that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to deal with it is in your own life. So if we're going to tackle anything which is cultural or atmospheric, we must make sure that we're not subject to it ourselves, because you have no authority to deal with anything that's operating in you. So that's the first step. I'm going to make sure that I deal with any attitudes, any mindsets, anything that's has been shaped by that religious culture or the culture of the area, whatever it might be, which you're looking to tackle. I'm going to tackle it first in me. Then we're going to tackle it in us as a group. So let's tackle it in the relationships I'm in, so that we're going to talk about this, identify it, own it. If we need to do a court case, we're going to have to identify with it. But don't try and identify with the whole area before you've identified with your own sphere first. Because so many people think, well, I see this, therefore I must be authorized to deal with it. You aren't. I see lots of things that I'm not authorized to deal with. we had a white dragon flying around this area for 2 years. It's been flying around here for a long time, but I saw it, a few years ago, and it was annoying me because I knew where it was based. I knew it was based around one of the churches, the largest church in the area. I knew that was where it was being fueled from. I know they were coming from the perspective they were, but I just had no authorization to deal with it, and that was frustrating. I must admit. But I kept going back to God. When am I going to be authorized to deal with this? And it's like, sometimes it's like when they went into the promised land, and when David did certain things, it wasn't until the fullness of the sin of the Amorites had come to a head, if you like, that you have the right. Sometimes there are seasons in God, that He has a time scale that we're not privy to, and we would just go and rush in and change it when actually things aren't full enough yet, or they're not in the right, or certain things have not been in place to be able to do it. And so I'd been looking at this thing for a couple of years, and then I organized a thing. I felt God call us to, on Good Friday, to stand in the high street with crosses and just stand in silence. Not to do anything. We need to take ground. We need to stand and occupy the ground on the basis of the power of the victory of the cross in silence. And people felt that was a really good thing to do. And when we did it, that was 2 years ago, Good Friday, and we were all standing there. I mean, it was just like an amazing presence of God. Silent. I mean, all the high street just went silent. All the people who weren't there, I mean, they just respected it. There was just this, whoa, and some people had T-shirts on that said, well, just ask why, and so they were able to talk to people about it. But it was just a sense, and I was standing there, and I saw all these angels up the high street, and then I saw this dragon, and God said, now you can deal with it. And I did. Now, my expectation was that, hey, that would free people up from the effects of it. It actually did the opposite. It brought the revelation, or the exposing where people were operating in it and where hearts were, came into the light. And people who were actually sort of pursuing something, but half-heartedly, all of a sudden, it was like the challenge was on. You're going to go for this or you're not. And most of them backed off because they were fearful and they were operating under that thing. So killing it actually wasn't what I thought was going to be the answer. But in reality, God knew what He was doing, because actually it authorized me to then operate in that authority, pull a bench to 3 together, start to produce a blueprint because they weren't. I'd been going around for 2-3 years, looking, what is the vision, what's the blueprint, how are we going to do this stuff, how are we going to see transformation, and we would go back and forward over semantics. Oh, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that? And in the end, it was almost like, okay, they are not going to do this. So that was the time to deal with that and therefore open up something new. So deal with it in the sphere and then see that sphere widen once you have testimony. If you're going to deal with it from a greater dimension, you need testimony of it outworking in your own life and in the sphere that you are operating in. Because then you use that testimony to engage that on a wider sphere, And the timing of it, there may be other people or other things that aren't ready yet or aren't in position yet. You just don't know. Don't do anything that you've not got a very clear authorized mandate to do. And it's been like that a long time, and it's not gonna matter whether it's there a little bit longer if you're on the case. The main thing is to know it's not going to be there forever on those who want to embrace a new order. Those who are still wanting to carry on in the Moses and the old institutional way of doing stuff, well, they're going to be under it. But if we're going to see a harvest of people come in we have to have storehouses who are not under it to be the places which are going to draw the harvest, and then those storehouses will then expand that atmosphere. So the pillar of fire will expand, or whatever picture you get for whatever your areas look like, they will expand as a result of salvation and more people coming out of darkness into light and being equipped to then live differently, engage heaven, take responsibility for their families, their neighborhood, and then you're going to expand as people do it. Because we're not responsible for every street or every region or every area within your region. The people who live there, or God has called first, are. And we need to equip them to take responsibility. Otherwise, what we'll be doing, setting up another, oh, the bench does all this for the area, what, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to do anything. No, we're teaching actual personal responsibility to rule your own life, your own family, your own neighborhood. So you then begin to equip people to do it. And so you can have a bench over Atlanta, they're not going to shift that atmosphere. What they're going to do is punch a hole through it, so an open heaven is on the earth, live under the open heaven, draw more people into the open heaven so they can punch holes through wherever they are. Which is why it has to be a discipleship process, not, oh, well, we'll get the spiritual warfare experts in here and they'll deal with the spiritual warfare, then we'll just have an open heaven over the whole of Atlanta. You won't. You know, those who continue in a religious sense, who are Christians, will authorize the enemy to keep under that blanket unless they want to come free from it. You're never going to remove that blanket from those who it's their comfort blanket. They actually like it. It's only those who don't want it who are going to want to change it. So you can take a testimony of the blessing it's brought, then share it, and more people will then begin to take responsibility. So don't think about it from we're going to do something and everything's going to change. It won't. But get the strategy for what you're supposed to do and see that as a bigger strategy, in that more and more people are going to be operating in these things, and therefore more and more authority is going to be exercised, and therefore more and more territory will be taken. But they didn't take Germany by parachuting into Germany. They took Germany in the Second World War by landing in Normandy and taking the beachhead, and that was intense battle to take that. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Saving Private Ryan, the film, but I mean, it's an horrendous thing. When they had these bullets getting off the landing craft and stuff, and lots of people died in that, when they took the beachhead. So there is an intense battle sometimes to establish the beachhead, which is why I think you've had so much hassle in terms of, hey, we've got to establish the beachhead and get the bench and get the 7 and get things functioning together. And also for others, it's like, get the beachhead, get it established, because that then will enable territory to be taken. And there are so many different groups who are going to have to be involved in that. So that's sort of some, basic things. So don't feel, hey, we've got to do it all now. It doesn't work that way. But God will give you the strategy as you seek Him, and as you follow it, it'll work out. That's why when I come into a place, I'm always living under an open heaven. Because I bring it with me. I've established it. I live under it. I don't come under the atmosphere of any place, but doesn't mean I can't see the atmosphere or see what's going on in the atmosphere, because I often can. So, yeah.
That was good, Mike. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll leave it.